I'm making a vlog today because, well, there's somebody, I'm waiting on somebody to do something and it's going to take a few more hours. So I thought, like, well, what better use of my time when I've nothing else to do? Discourse with the tribe, ironical as we come to know them. So, yes, it's hopefully the signal on this holds out good and we're, we're fine. I can see there's two people now. There we go, we're online. Hi, how you doing? So, let's talk about the world as I normally do. So, something terrible happened this weekend in Ireland. Two young women, girls basically, died running, and two Irish girls, one in Scotland and one in Ireland, died running in marathons. And of course, we're being told that this thing has all happened all the time and we're being hysterical. And you think when you see the comments on like the Irish media websites among the normies that the they're in denial. I think there's some of them are in denial, but I think many of them actually do believe that this is some kind of mystery and not related to the Jabberwocky. Now, there will be ones who don't want to go to the point where they have to accept that maybe they sacrificed their own children by forcing them to get the Jabberwocky, by get the foghorn leghorn. Sorry, spit went down the wrong way. That's not an easy thing for. It's also the pollen. The hay fever is awful right now. That's not an easy thing for a parent to actually admit to yourself. Probably the darkest thing of all, that you probably sacrificed your child to Stephen Colbert or Dolly Parton or the Late Late Show in order to because of your own neuroses, fear, and lack of independent thinking. And you would like to think that they're in denial, but a lot of them they're not. They're actually going with the program. It's one of the reasons I pulled away from the whole open borders immigration thing. Other than, like, I support the people who I always supported on that, and I wished them well, because like it came out. It's just been announced really that the Irish are the most educated people in the world. They hold more degrees than any other nation. That just means the Irish are the most indoctrinated people in the world. That's what that means. They're completely brainwashed. That's all that means. The Irish are the most brainwashed people in the world. And I meet them all every day of my life. They're incapable of, thinking for themselves. They're completely controlled by mass media. So it's put this country in a quandary. The only hope I can have is that, like, the young kids coming up, will be the ones who will suffer at the most at the hands of this, like, vibrant society with its great ethnic restaurants and so on. And they'll be in 20, 30 years the generation who will actually say enough already, because they're the ones who are beaten up and assaulted by, you know, enrichment and that kind of thing, and lost opportunities to it. And so this is why, like, you have the lefties here in Ireland are desperate to reduce the voting age to 16, which is a ploy by them because they think all teenagers are all brainwashed and will vote for lefty parties because they think that's what they're comparing their own teenage years in the 80s and 90s to teenage years now. Teenage years now in the West are very differently. If you're a native European kid, you're basically a new minority and you're being picked on. So they might be in for a big surprise and find out that the 16-year-olds are lining up to vote for the far right. But that's not going to, even so, that's not going to happen for a while. And you know me, I don't like democracy anyway. I have no faith in it. It's an awful system. Now, so this is what it was like this weekend. It was like, we had, like, immigrant gang stabbings and killings, and the native Irish dropping dead from the needlecraft. So it's a perfect sort of, like, storm of what the future is. Of what the future is. It's unavoidable as far as I'm concerned at this point. Those of you who think you're going to get back the Ireland of the 1990s, and it's not coming. It's not. You're not going to get it back. The best you can hope for is we become a tribe and try to hold the territory of our nation as much, and the same goes, this goes to the English and the French and the Scots and everyone else, to hold as much, hold as much territory as possible. But that's the best we can do under the circumstances. We might have to wait 1,000 years. I mean, the last time Europe fell under Islam through the Ottomans and the Moorish Caliphate, in Spain and Portugal, what was it, 900 years, 800 years? So don't be kidding yourself that, don't, this Christian psychosis that some kind of wonderful thing is going to happen overnight. It could, and I'd be the first to drop on my knees and grab rosary beads if it was. But I like to consider myself a practical spiritual person, in that I just can't go with fate. And then people say, well, you're a pagan, Thomas. Where's the... Well, it's look around you. That was what initially drew me to paganism as a child, is that, the sun exists, the seasons exist, the miracle of nature coming back every year. And, this, as what's his name? Al Pacino said in The Devil's Advocate, he said, God's an absentee landlord. Where was Jesus Christ during the famine? On holiday? Where was he? Where was he during the Crimean Wars? I mean, the Irish have prayed to this Jewish rabbi for, over 1,000 years, and he's not interested in the Paddy Goyim. That's the way I saw it, I'm not trying to be offensive or to hurt people, but I mean, as this all was going on, the sun still rose, the wonder of nature continued, and that was physically tangible to me. But even having said that, it was more of a case of a logical sort of assumption in my own kind of fermenting consciousness. Now, I don't have a problem if you've been a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew, or that's your own business. I don't care. That's nothing to do with me. And your faith, you're entitled to, and I will do anything to protect your faith, once you don't try to come after mine. And that's the whole thing. I will do everything to safeguard your religious practice, once you don't try to force convert me, because you can't. To me, that's one of the evil things in the world, is proselytization, either through, when it goes to the extreme of jihad or crusade. To me, that's the most evil thing, and the elites are now completely on board with all that. I mean, even that lunatic who runs the EU even said, when he said that Europe is Talmudic, that was up there with that other piece of shit lunatic Peterson, who said there was no European civilization, it was all Jewish from the Middle East. Fucking dickhead. How anyone could listen to him after that? What, Greece and Rome never existed? Even the place in the Middle East that they claim to be like, were Middle Eastern, like Carthage, were much more European, as were the Assyrians. They were much more European in their mentality than the Arabs who came later, in their, and the Turks who came in later. So, Peterson just made my blood boil when he said that, and he really showed what his agenda is, that he's a dopey fuckwit too. And so anyway, he's another one with them. He's just out there to just make you believe that, there's hope. That's his, when he's not crying like a baby, and this kind of thing. So, no respect for him after that. My God, what an astonishing statement. How anyone who is a European nationalist, or a nationalist or a civilizationist, could stand by Jordan Peterson after he made this statement that there was no European civilization. It all came from the Jews and the Muslims from the Middle East, or whatever, the Babylonians. But anyway, I digress. Well, I don't really. So, yeah, like, I never had this spiritual thing that really stuck with me, to the point, I said it's logic that maybe the natural world exists, and people of other religions, whether they be Taoists or Buddhists or Christians, would say, well, that's their God. It's Allah. It's Allah. It's Jehovah. It's whatever. The great spirit of the Native Americans, which is very pagan anyway, doing all this, with that, and like, there is a schizophrenia in things like Christianity, where they say God controls everything, but he's nowhere around during the Irish famine. I mean, what's that, schizophrenia? How about he abandoned you? How about he doesn't care about you? No, that won't pass. That won't pass. No, that won't pass. So, because you're a goyim, just like, you're not Christians. You're not Jewish. I mean, this is why the early church fathers referred to non-Jews as Gentiles, because it was a Jewish religion. and it always has been, always will be. I'm not saying anything wrong with that. If you want to worship a Jewish God, that's your own business. But if don't be then shocked when he's nowhere, it's nowhere to be found. When your country is being overrun by Abrahamics, as it is right now, from a certain demographic in the Middle East. Dog is rats. You know, there's a lot to be said for that theory by Ragastani's theory of Cyclopedia that oil is a demonic god living under the Middle East. There's a sentient, Tyrellian being, a Lovecraftian entity, and it uses oil under the earth in its battle with the sun. And you could even see look at the Ukraine war. What's that about, really? Oil. Remember the bombing of the gas lines and everything? The Nordic gas streams lines, and it's a big agricultural war too because of the farming in the Ukraine. But a lot of modern farming, whether it's in Holland or anything, is based on petroleum, gas, and oil to create everything from fertilizers to pesticides and all other kinds of petrochemicals used in agriculture. So so you could even see like the us being invaded by North Africans. Look what's happening in Paris at the moment. Is that not proof of a Shatanic god, destroying French civilization by moving the people of the land of oil into their world? These things we have to consider. We can't just sit there and say, okay, I'll say a few decades of the Rosary and maybe Ireland will be free. Or we can vote for some politicians and maybe Europe will be saved. It doesn't work like that. Your own personal life doesn't work like that. When a relationship falls apart, or you know something like that goes, it doesn't. It's extremely complicated, involving all kinds of dynamics that bring a person's life to a certain point where a crisis happens, and it's not just a matter of saying click. It's fixed. There's all kind. It's so multifaceted, the whole thing, the tangents along the way. All you can do is draw a line in the sand and say, okay, from this point on, it no longer happens. And that's what I've always advocated with the whole thing of like whether it was just weight or anything else, is a divorce from this game, this matrix, from the demiurge, whatever you want to call it, Jehovah, Abraham, the globalization. Just a line underneath it, right? And then begin again. Okay, so that was always been my philosophy in life. And I may be wrong, I don't know, but that's always been my philosophy. And I can always remember, like, back in the 90s, even though I was a pagan and had a pagan mind, I was, still looking for that proof of an absolute spiritual dynamic to the universe. Remember, this is before the internet now, and there was no Wikipedia, there was no, brilliant, philosophical videos online you could watch. It was no book, there wasn't these archives of books, on the Gutenberg press and other places you could consult. You had to basically find what you could. And I was definitely, after I read the Bhagavad Gita in the late 80s, I was definitely moving to a more philosophical mindset than I say, even though I was a pagan, it was more philosophical than spiritual. And I can definitely, like, I can remember the passage in the Bhagavad Gita, the despondency of Arjuna. It left an enormous impression on me that stays with me to this day. But I was still interested in occult and everything like that, and all that other stuff. But to me, it was scientific, it was technology, maybe it was, and it was the whole thing of like it's magic is science that hasn't been discovered. But I now believe it's much more deeper than that, and so is spirituality. And it's not just a process we don't understand. It is truly transcendental and mystical, regardless of what path you take towards it, whether it be Christian mysticism or, you know, Protestant. Well, there is a kind of a Protestant mysticism when you think about it, like the sort of English Anglican version of of the Protestant religion, with the harvest festivals, and you definitely get that feeling when you go around these country parishes in rural England that there's a kind of an ancient pagan vibe to them. So yeah, absolutely. I guess there would be. In my own kind of mind, I always kind of come back to Calvinism and Lutheranism, but I have to remember there's a lot more to religion, to Presbyterianism than that, but Protestantism than that. But yeah, so yeah, I can remember like I used to go to the Magical Child Occult and Witchcraft bookshop in Manhattan a lot. Well, not a lot, but I mostly got fanzines there. It was the golden. I had a fanzine out myself. It was the golden age of fanzines. There was loads of great. I got loads of great stuff there, and also the Alchemist Head in Dublin, another occult bookshop, and I can remember. It's the weirdest things ever, but there was uh, this fanzine there that was published by something, and honestly, I might have even been Wiccan. I don't know what it was, but it was some kind of New York. There was back then, not now. There isn't. There was loads of occult groups in New York at that time. Lot of witchcraft, a lot of it, and there was a lot of like LaVey Satanism as well, which definitely appealed to me because of the logic to it. I do the Satanic Ten Commandments and the Satanic Bible. I just couldn't argue with it. It just made a lot of sense to me. And but then I realized it's really just natural law being called Satanism. See, people don't know what Satanism is. They think that Satanism is fellas dressed in robes, and summoning the devil. No, it's not that. That's cosplay. That's no more realistic than like heavy metal edgelords writing satin rules on this while listening to like Slayer, and and drinking bottles of cider behind the church wall, the church parish hall back in the like late 80s. It's not real Satanism. Real Satanism is a philosophical path, ultimately based on natural law, which is basically atheism. But what I liked about LaVey's Satanism, and particularly Aquino's Temple of Set, is that the supernaturalism wasn't fully discarded. I mean, some of the best writings on Lovecraft is from Michael Aquino. His Order of the Nine Angles stuff is just tremendous, unbelievable. Who or whatever he was. I mean, definitely was like, wow, this is like really interesting stuff. But there was a pamphlet. I wouldn't even call it a fanzine. I'll call it a pamphlet, and it was based on astrological cycles. Now, I'm not a big one for astrology. Not that I don't believe it. I do believe it. It's just that it's not something I can do. I've got enough on my plate. I want to know a lot about astrology. I want to help promote astrology, but I can't. I don't have the time to go. So I have my friends like Fiona and Olivia, who they're sort of like my mentors, as mavens. You know, matriarchs in that kind of world. I learned an awful lot from them, and Tina with the runes. So they kind of like demystified all that stuff for me by sort of bringing in the light and shadow stuff, which is very important in any kind of spiritual path. And this pamphlet was about astrological cycles to do with magical ritual. And so, the usual thing I thought, Purgus Night. And in the very back was a very basic, rudimentary computer drawing, like from an old like IBM system or something, of a pentagram. And the pentagram, the pentagram was formed by the interplay of the planet Venus and the Earth. That when Venus and the Earth, their compatible rotational orbits together, form a perfect five-sided pentagram in the sky. Then I find out that as much as that blew my mind, this is why the pentagram became central within modern witchcraft, is for that one of the reasons. Even though it's an ancient symbol, but it's not. You'd be surprised how it's not really as ancient. It's not like it wouldn't be as central to magic, say, as the hexagram, the Star of David, or something like that. It's much more recent in terms of its popularity, and had a lot to do with that discovery between that it formed the pentagram. So that's why that, and then it's Venus is Lucifer, and what does Venus represent? The morning and the evening star, and this is suddenly everything from the tarot card star of the tarot to the whole esoteric concept of the Luciferian honesty, the light, the light and the light of truth, And there was absolute proof that these planets, there's no way they could have formed and the whole concept, even within theosophy, of Lucifer being the god of the earth because of the relationship of the planet Venus, and Jehovah God, the super god, the god of the universe, being the god of outside the earth, that the earth was different, which I kind of like the idea because it ties in beautifully with things like, the concept that we're alone in a cosmic forest, and it's just us really, on this planet. Is the only place stuff is happening. There's millions of planets out there, but they don't have what's going on here. And so that was absolute proof for me that there was a divine intelligence to the universe, that the interrelational orbits between Venus and the Earth was absolute proof. And from that moment on, I became a hardcore pagan, and I started to look into this stuff everywhere. And so that's only that my spiritual depth in that stuff has only deepened. That's maybe why they even refer to. I mean, there's no mention of Lucifer in the Bible, none, zero. That's a mistaken translation in the King James Bible, where Scottish and English Calvinists couldn't translate Hebrew properly. But there is a mention of, and it is confirmable that Jesus does refer to himself as the sun and the morning star, the morning and the evening star. Let that one sink into you esoterically inclined ones. But I'm not saying there's anything intense, but there might be. But it's a very interesting quote. So that's sort of like the grounding, the foundation, that we have a spiritual dynamic to this. And this is why when the Rona thing kicked off, I felt very much this was a spiritual battle. And like I was saying, with things being the sum of total of everything, you you start to see things in these terms more clearly, because you're not grounded into one thing, or you're not a Muslim, where everything is tied up in the Quran, or you're a Jew where it's all tied up in the Torah, or a Christian in the Bible or scripture, whatever. You have a holistic approach that comes in from numerous directions. It's incredibly interesting, but also answers questions. And everything you find along the way, such as, Radhastani's book, Cyclopedia, and even like, that pamphlet I found, you realize that all those things have been left there for you. That they are like Rupert Sheldrake's morphic resonance, that they unfold. There was like so many people who, on our side, who were against the lockdowns and the Rona stuff. And Neil Oliver was saying this the other day in an interview with that Dr. Campbell and another interesting chap. And they were saying that, like, I would never go back because I've met all these amazing people. I've not only have discovered that orthodoxy is a sham, it's basically, as we live in it right now, a creation of cultural Marxism, but I've had all these experiences and this new information that's been thrilling and come into my life. So these people who say, when I woke up, I became all depressed. Well, why? Because I discovered everything was a sham. Okay, fair enough. But then I had to stop going there because like it got, no. How about you enjoy this journey and you see these things opening up in front of you as gifts from the universe? That, like, say you're a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim right now being offended by what I'm saying, is what about seeing that as a call to expanding your mind? What about seeing that as a call to being more tolerant? I mean, I would actually say I'm fairly anti-Christian, but when I come across something beautiful in Christianity, I will not deny the beauty of that. I will not deny the beauty of those feelings in those English country churches, in those churchyards. There is a beauty there. I will not deny the beauty of Clonmacnoise and the abbeys, the ruins there of the ecclesiastical buildings, and the legacy of Saint Kieran and the Escarida and the spiritual path across Ireland from Dublin Bay to Galway Bay. I will not deny the mystical beauty of the Cathar country, or the Camino in northern Spain, or being in lots of things, and being touched by the spiritual devotion of certain Christian people that I obviously you cannot fault them. So that's so my if you that, but that doesn't mean I'm going to give up being a pagan. That doesn't mean I'm going to give up. I just say, yeah, that's their path. I understand. I totally get that. No problem. But having said that, there was no Jesus Christ for the Irish during the famine, and so that's how I balance it with both. So it's everything is a learning process. Everything is a movement. Now, when you lock yourself into these things, the prime example of that was, and it's the main reason I've made this video, Bono on Joe Rogan. Watching Bono on Joe Rogan was one of the most painful things I think I've ever watched on the internet. It was literally an awful experience. Now, I love U2's early albums, and I always will. I love the first four albums, Boy October, War, and The Unforgettable Fire, then bits of all the later other stuff. I like most of Achtung Baby, and I won't fault that stuff. That's the music of it. But Bono had a chance to go on Joe Rogan and not be the dry shite that he can be. And he was a monumental dry shite on that show. It was, now, when he was talking about music, whether it was Frank Sinatra, Johnny Cash, or anything, great. That was brilliant. I mean, that, and Joe Rogan, if you watch the video, Joe Rogan is kind of trying to dovetail him into talking more about his musical life, and his ability as a singer and a performer, because Joe Rogan's obviously a U2 fan, and he talks about like he was stoned on mushrooms once listening to In God's Country from the Joshua Tree. That's a song I do like from that album. And yeah, I mean, but what did he have to do? He goes on this tangent about USA and killing, and he starts the conversation by, and this is amazing, right? Now, as far as I was concerned, Bono was in there on government duty, Irish government duty, because they're obviously afraid that someone like Conor McGregor is going to be invited onto Joe Rogan and talk about the realities facing Irish people in this globalization world, specifically about the collapse of. Bono was even defending restrictions on free speech during this Joe Rogan interview, where he said, Joe Rogan, like me, quite rightly said, free speech is sacrosanct. Let everybody say anything they want, and good ideas will float and bad ideas will die. And that's the fundamental maxim that I live my life by in terms of the world. Let everybody have a say. Let's see what flies and what's bullshit talk. Money, bullshit walks in these situations. Wisdom talks and bullshit walks, to paraphrase the statement. Now, Bono starts off by saying, it's not confirmed. Now, who the fuck starts off a comment by saying, it's not confirmed, and then expects to be taken in credibility? You would start it off by saying, well, you do hear stories, or, I don't know if it's true or not. It's a bit, we'll find out, I guess. But to say it's not been confirmed, but according to sources, 300,000 people have died since US aid was cut off. Now, that was an appeal to guilt, the emotional manipulation. And for the first time probably in his entire life as a celebrity, Bono was challenged. And Joe Rogan's politely and correctly put him straight on all that it's not true. And this whole notion that food is rotting in warehouses, it's not rotting in warehouses. That USA food wouldn't be fresh fruit and vegetables, it'd be all canned and dried food, and ready meals and stuff like that. It wouldn't be fresh fruit and it would last for decades. So like that was it, but the appeal to emotion that you get with these types. And Bono looked incredibly. What Bono looked like was, that meme where the girl says, the guy is trying to impress the girl and he says something completely wrong. That's what the whole Bono interview was like. And proof that he was there on government business was he suggested that David McWilliams should be a guest on Joe Rogan. David McWilliams is quite possibly the most nothingness Irish person you could possibly imagine. David McWilliams is the intellectual and so we say, erudite version of, say, You walk into a Tesco supermarket and you see, you know, when they have all the plastic shopping bags all hanging up, ready, ready for someone to take them to put their groceries in. He is that. He is one of them. He is an unused Tesco shopping bag on the rack waiting to be used. Now, whereas a shopping bag that's blowing around in the wind, and that has an aesthetic quality that's interesting to it. Remember that film American Beauty, where the guy films the shopping bag blowing around? That's a shopping bag lying in the gutter is interesting. A shopping bag waiting to be used in a supermarket, all neatly folded up and sitting there when you could easily bring your own shopping bag and not buy one, is a perfect example of what David McWilliams is as a commentator. A whole pile of neatly arranged nothing. He wrote a book called The Pope's Children that is absolutely the stupidest fucking thing you've ever heard. He tried to make out that Ireland changed on the day the Pope arrived. No, Ireland changed, and it was changing incrementally from the 60s on. But he creates a glossary that, oh, I'm so clever, a glossary of terms. It's absolutely stupid. And when Bono suggested him, I said, oh, you motherfucker. Oh, you fucking bastard. You're here on Irish government business, aren't you? And you want to make sure that you get in your, free speech is bad, you know, Trump is bad, TDS, Elon Musk is bad, and before, and here's another one. Here's another piece of fluff that I'm friends with from the Dalkey Book Club called David McWilliams, who was like who fancies himself as an Irish Stephen Fry, but he's actually even more vacuous than Stephen Fry, who's a sensationally vacuous, and he's there in government business. Why? To stop Joe Rogan from having on Irish people who might actually talk about Ireland in real terms. It was a pre-strike. He was sent out there by his little Irish government friends and establishment, and he made an absolute bollocks of it because he's getting arse raped all over the internet because of it. It was a catastrophe in terms of him trying to defend his globalist best buddies. And it's tragic because it's obviously clear that Bono's a nice man. He doesn't come across a bad man in any way. I'm not one of these people that have a different opinion than someone I instantly claim them to be evil because I'm not Abrahamic. I will say that's fucking tragic because what that man is. I've seen U2 live from the earliest days, and what that his music has done and his singing can do is magical and supernatural. And to see him reduced to this bubbling pundit, spewing cliche. His idea of, like someone said, his idea of a working class man is Bruce Springsteen, who never was a working class man, really. Hey, yeah, like that's it. That's it in a nutshell. They're both the same type. They're dinosaurs trapped in the past. The world has moved on, and even though I'm sure in his case it's motivated by good intentions, I'm sure it is. He's never had this. He's only surrounded by other people saying, "Yes, you're great," and I agree. Hello, I'm a celebrity, Bono. You're great, and I agree. That's really what he's surrounded by. He's never been around but surrounded by someone who said, "Hold on a second, what?" And Joe Rogan did that very politely and very correctly. Did that. That's why Joe Rogan's podcast is the biggest thing in the world, because it's one of the few places sane people can find sane discourse. And he's also very good. Honest to God, Bono sounded like Kamala Harris during most of that interview. It was just purely word salad and waffling that really stitched nothing together. And it was tragic to see because, when he's gone, I hope people remember him for the band and the singing and not for nonsense like this. But he's ruining his legacy with this. He's ruining it. And it's a great tragedy, terrible tragedy. And like I said, he came across as a very sincere, good man. And I have no problem with him a person, but that was a Luciferian moment because Joe Rogan shone the light of truth on Bono, and what it showed was that Bono was out of his depth in all these things he thinks he's like an expert in. That's what really happened, and it was both tragic, comic, and sad at the same time. But that really left a big impression on me this week. What went on, And of course, he'd no mention like when, and then, but then again, like, why did you actually say that maybe we need restrictions or imply we need restrictions on free speech because the internet wasn't envisioned? I mean, this is him around as Jeffrey Sachs and all these cretins he hangs out with, Klaus Schwab and the rest of them. How about just like hanging out with some rock stars, and I mean real rock stars, young people from the streets, and not like other people that have mansions and made millions, like Bruce Springsteen. It's that back in the 70s we used to hear about the punk rock was the rebellion against excess in rock. Fleetwood Mac having you know an airplane for one of their guitars and this kind of thing, and they all having their own limos and hot and cold champagne. Well, that excess still exists within rock, but it's vapid opinions by vacuous pop stars, rock stars, the Bruce Springsteens, the Bonos, the Sheryl Crows, all of them, you know, Neil Young, all of them. That's the modern version of you know, the Queen Party with the midget with the cocaine on the top of his head, which was actually pretty cool, I have to say. But then that rock excess has moved from, you know, that kind of world into the waffling about subjects they don't fully understand and the complexities of life in a very almost Bono sounded like a child, like Kamala Harris sounds like a child on that show. And I part of me I don't want to watch this because I love U2's early music and I'm fighting hard to hold on to that love and I hope he could redeem. And it started out fairly okay, but my God, it went south much worse than I even expected. But having said that, I've trained because I don't have an Abrahamic mind and I can understand nuance and gray area. I'm still able to listen to songs, that's albums like October and The Unforgettable Fire without without that poisoning me. It's true. You have to say unless they've done something really evil, like your man from the kid, what was his name? Ian, what's his name? The kiddie fiddler, one who the baby rapist from the Lost Prophets. That's extreme. Like that's the Jimmy Savile level. But that I couldn't separate. But I can separate like waffling about bullshit and this kind of thing. I mean, he's sitting there talking about how he loves George Bush Jr. because he's done so much for AIDS. I mean, if there was one person that has served the Shatonic oil gods, the Tellurian, Radagast, Radaga, Radistanian, Radistanian, oil demiurge of the Middle East, it's the Bush family. They've killed millions in the name of oil, right from Prescott Bush right through to them, the ones today. And yeah, but that's okay because he gave a few. That's a Christian mentality. He gave a few quid to AIDS, so he's a great man. He's saved. Fuck's sake. But yeah. So like that's what I really wanted to talk about today. I was going to talk about Saturday, but I'm going to get it out now. But yeah, Bono on feckin' Joe Rogan, and it was an absolute car crash interview, horror show, with fleeting moments of interesting and nice things that Joe Rogan deliberately interjected to, but it wasn't going to stay there. It wasn't going to stay there, not with him, and not with Bono, and the events in Paris. I mean, the 4 nights now of riots since PSG won the Champions League. Now, and all I'm seeing are seas. These people say, all as Paris is being destroyed, all I'm seeing are Palestinian flags being waved by the vandals. It looks just like fucking Gaza. And you Palestinians, that's what you're importing. They will be burning Dublin to the ground in time, and they'll be waving your beloved Palestinian flag. I can guarantee you, or other North African Arab flags. I can guarantee you. And that's the Shatonic oil god moving uh, the the servitors of the Middle East into our lands, following the oil pipelines. I'm telling you that theory really does make an awful lot of sense. It makes a tremendous amount of sense, and even the global warming thing ties in perfectly with it. So this is what we're up against. You know, we're up against, you know, like, where are Bonos when you have an Algerian immigrant stabbing Irish children through the head? Do you know we still don't know what happened to those kids at that school in Dublin? And apparently, the Irish media tried to make out that one of them had returned back to school. Apparently, the child is so brain damaged from the knife through her skull that she communicates by blinking. Like, why, you know, where is your Christian love? Where is your beautiful for that thing? Where's that? When are you going to bring that up? You know, this is what gets me about these people, and you know, it's like the riots that happened in Dublin after that night. A lot of the loot was done by immigrants, and yet the next morning, every Irishman is blamed for it, just like every Irishman was blamed for the rape, the murder of Aisling Murphy, even though it was done by a Roma gypsy, an import, a welfare import, and it's despicable breed. Uh, and no one wants to talk about this. No, you're right. They're just the this is what, and then the normies will go along with that. Oh, you know, like, it's like, how dare you tell me the truth? You can sum up normies and Abrahamics into one phrase: how dare you tell me the truth? How dare you force me to think beyond the parameters of my indoctrination, fate, and limitation? How dare you? I will hate you forever because you opened up my mind. Because what you see is what you saw on Bono's surface on the Joe Rogan side show is the interior mechanism that operates inside the mind of the normie. You know, so like, I know it's people say, well, you know, you're causing a fracture by telling people if they have all normie family members who are all Jabberwockied, and they all think that they, you know, they all don't have a problem with the open border things because of great ethnic food, or I was once treated by a Filipino nurse that was really nice. If they can't extrapolate that to the bigger problems created by this stuff, you just don't deal with them. Don't engage. You know, there's lots and lots of, and along with that, you become your own psychic vampire. You know, like when there's psychic vampires out there, they're people that come into your life and they're around you, and if they're not criticizing you, or you just feel shit when you've been after them. You feel exhausted when you've been at, you know, because they produce nothing internally, they harvest energy from others. You know, a lot of newspaper journalists are like this. That's why they rate it so high on the psychopathic list, and a lot of just like fucking busybodies. You know, like the person on your street who, you know, oh, I heard your mother and father got divorced. Yeah, why was that then? And you're like, well, you know, they don't love each other anymore. Oh, really? You know, and what's your father's name? Those types, you know. Oh, sure, God love you. You know, those types. Vampires. They're psychic vampires. But when you try to, if you have family members or friends that you've said, look, the fucking vaccine is killing people. The fucking needlecraft is killing people. You know, we're being flooded with people. And what's happening in Paris is going to happen in every town in Ireland. And if you can't reach them, what you're doing is you become the psychic vampire of yourself. And that's why you feel shit and demoralized after being around them. Even if you had like rushes of of success, you know, with by meeting like-minded people. What does that tell you? That's where you need to be. That's your tribe. The tribe are the people who make you feel good. The anti-tribe members are the ones who make you feel bad. And it's not a matter of opinion or conjecture or topics or discourse or anything. It's literally a sensation you feel. I have spent 20 minutes with this person and I feel like absolute shit. I don't feel I've grown as a person. I feel more secure in myself. Or I felt 20 minutes with this person and found them quite interesting, and they were quite good company to be around. I'd like to be with them. Or I spent 20 minutes with this person trying to make them understand that the world is not as the TV news is telling them, and I actually felt worse than anything. Well, that's the law, that's natural law, and that's natural law looking after your ass. And as Ali G would say, recognize, obey. Take care, love yous all, and be safe.